Welcome to Regional Express 10922 with passenger service from Siegen to Aachen, though this timetable includes only a portion of the full route. I know that at the end of the last video I said we would be having our next lesson on a different route, so this is a great time to talk about how detailed Zusi is. I just spent about 3 hours going through a route and talking about signs and signals. I got to a few signals which were a little odd, and so I looked into it further and I happened to choose part of the only route in Germany where they implemented an experimental signaling system. And it doesn't make much sense to make a general signaling tutorial on a niche signaling system that you may never see, so we're going to do it on this route instead. So, in this video, we're going to be focused exclusively on trackside signs and signals. We will be addressing train operation and safety systems in a future video, so you can ignore all of the beeps and buzzers for the moment. We'll follow this service, and when we encounter a new sign or signal, the video will pause so we can discuss it. In Germany, mainline driving is done on the right side, and your signs and signals are displayed on the right side of the track. There may be instances where, due to physical constraints, the signal must be mounted overhead, but generally they will be on the right side of the track. Germany has a few different signaling systems. If you played the Zusi demo and went through the tutorial, you experienced semaphore signals, and these are in use on other routes as well. The routes we will be using in this series will be modern color light signals using the H/V system. This uses a main signal head with HP aspects and a distant signal head using VR aspects. Each signal indication has a particular name, such as HP1, HP2, etc. for a main signal, and VR1, VR2, etc. for a distant signal. Together, these combinations make up the HV system. The main signals will appear as black rectangular boxes with varying light combinations and indicate what the train operator must do at that time. The distant signals will sometimes be mounted below the main signal head, but can also be independent. They are smaller, diagonal heads and indicate what the upcoming main signal is displaying. So if a distant signal shows a stop indication, which is VR0, it means that the operator must be prepared for a main signal ahead to display a stop indication, HP0. The train does not need to stop until it reaches the main signal. Our first signal is in front of us and is a distant signal, which you can surmise because of its diagonal orientation. It is displaying VR1, proceed, which tells us that the upcoming main signal is displaying HP1, proceed. I'm going to continue to use the aspect names so you can become familiar with them, but don't worry about memorizing all the names in the beginning. Now, this distance signal has an added component, a white light. This white light tells us that the main signal ahead is at a shorter distance from us than we would normally expect. Generally, the distant signal will be within braking distance of the main signal to allow you time to slow the train for an adverse signal such as HP0, which is stop. The specific distance can vary as it is based on the track speed. Obviously, you'll need more time and distance to stop a train that is going faster. This white light on the distant signal head warns us that we have a shorter distance to the main signal and need to take that into account when we're managing our speed. Here's our first sign, and also the one you'll see the most of, a kilometer post. This sign tells us we are at kilometer 68.0 on the route. If we were at kilometer post 5.3, you would see a 5 on top of a 3. You can use these to figure out where you are on your timetable during your trip. This is the main signal that the previous distant signal was referencing. As you may recall, the distant signal was displaying VR1, and this signal is displaying HP1 for proceed. The signal head itself is mounted on a post which has a white, red, white colored pattern on it. This post coloration tells us that we cannot pass a signal if it is malfunctioning unless it is displaying an appropriate subsidiary or substitute signal, or we have written permission from the signalman to do so. If there was an attached M board, we could also accept verbal permission from the signalman. Normally, you could use your train radio to contact the signaler, but if it was inoperational, you can also use a telephone that is located in the gray box next to the signal post. You'll see these along the line, and they're usually labeled with a black F on the front of them. Because our version of Zusi does not support signalers, we should interpret this white, red, white coloration to mean that we cannot pass this signal if it is broken, unless it is displaying a valid subsidiary signal. If the signal was broken or otherwise inoperable for some reason, we may see a subsidiary or substitute signal. This would be indicated by a single red light with a small cluster of 3 lights at the bottom. 3 white lights in the shape of a triangle would indicate that we could proceed, and 3 yellow lights in the shape of an inverted triangle would indicate that we could proceed on site, which means we would need to proceed slowly and watch for additional trains in our section of track. Subsidiary signals are a more advanced topic, and you shouldn't expect to see them very frequently, but you should be aware that they exist so you can look them up if necessary. A couple of other signal head states are possible, which bear some discussion as well. First, the signal head itself could be broken and completely dark, though I don't know if this is simulated in Zusi. Because our signal post has the white, red, white markings, we would need to contact the signaler, so it is unlikely that you would see that specific situation in the simulator. However, if the white, red, white markings were not present, then I believe that you can proceed past the signal on site. Now, there is one small exception to this that you will likely see. If you have a main signal that shows HP0, which is a single red light and indicates a stop command, there is a distant signal on the same post that shows the aspect of the upcoming main signal. That distant signal head will be dark. This is because you are supposed to stop, and it would be confusing to be receiving information about the next signal when you aren't allowed to proceed towards it. As soon as the main signal changes from red to another aspect, the distant signal should then also display valid information. And a third possibility is that a signal head is not currently in use for various reasons. But they can't just turn the whole thing off because the driver would interpret that as being a defective signal. So instead, they will leave one small white light lit. A dark signal head with a single steady white light tells you to ignore the signal. It is working fine, but it doesn't have any information to give you. Okay, on the ground here on the right side, you can see small little signals. These are for shunting operations, and Zusi does not have shunting operations, so I'm not going to really go into depth on this, but suffice it to say, these are signals that tell shunters when they can proceed and when they have to stop and such. We're focused on running movements. This white rectangular marker with the black stripes is a distant signal approach marker. The next one has 2 black stripes, and the final one has 1 black stripe. There are normally 3 of them in succession, but there can be up to 5 in rare cases. They are a warning that you are approaching a distant signal and need to pay attention. The one we see here is 250 meters away from the signal, the next one will be 175 meters, and the final one is 100 meters from the signal. Okay, here's our next distant signal. Um, you can see it's displaying VR1, so I should expect to proceed at the next main signal. The one thing that you can see on this distant signal that we could not see on the last one, likely due to where the train was positioned, is um, the white and black sign at the bottom of the post with the two opposing triangles. That is just an indicator that this is the distant signal. So here we are at another distant signal, and we really haven't gone very far. And the reason that we have this one and not a main signal is because we're about to go around this bend. So we don't have visibility to the main signal. So we have another distant signal reminding us what the upcoming aspect is. And this way, if the aspect changes, we know about it. And it has that little white light that reminds us that the braking distance between this and the main signal is less than what we would normally expect. There's also not that little white and black placard down below, um, which to me indicates that this is not the original distant signal. This is, I guess you could call it an intermediate distant signal. This orange placard indicates that we have a speed reduction ahead. So we need to reduce our speed to 80 by the time we hit the speed placard, which should be well within our braking distance. And we're still going through this long curve. We still can't see the main signal, so we get yet another intermediate distance signal with the little white light illuminated. And at long last, we have arrived at the main signal. And you can see that our aspect is a single green light, which is proceed, and we have a co-located distance signal, which is showing VR0, which is stop. So we can go now, but we have to stop next. So now we have to begin to decelerate so that we can be prepared to stop at the next signal. Okay, if you recall, not too long ago, we had the orange speed reduction warning down to 80 kilometers per hour. This is the point at where we now must be down to 80 kilometers or under before we pass this board. So this is a speed board. If we were accelerating and we did not have a speed reduction, then we can accelerate to the new speed once our entire train has passed the board. Okay, we're arriving at this platform, and you can see there is a distant signal that is attached to the roof of the platform showing VR0 stop with the reduced distance warning. And that's just because you can't really see the main signal, which is just right around the corner at the end of this platform. Here is our exit signal, and it's displaying HP0, proceed. Since we're paused here, let's also talk about the red signal to our left. This doesn't apply to our track, but it's still a good learning opportunity. As you can see, there are two red lights. Train operations can be classified as running movements, such as when we are moving from station to station along the main line. Shunting movements, which are usually freight movements or repositioning movements confined within a yard or a station. In the past, shunting trains could ignore signals intended for running movements because they had constant communication with the station signaler. And so the signal on the left shows a red light for running movements and a second red light for shunting movements. Eventually, the rules were changed and shunters had to obey signals for running movements. So more modern signal heads will display only a single red light, but there is no reason to replace the older double light heads, so they're still in use. Technically, the double red light is referred to as HP00, and the single red light is HP0, but there's no operational difference between them. Treat both aspects as HP0, which is a stop command. Okay, if you notice this blue and white sign on the left side of the track, it doesn't apply to us. It's not on our track. It also has an arrow indicating for movement to the left. But what that means is that if you have a pantograph, such as what we do to draw current from the overhead wires, you need to stop because the catenary that runs overhead is ending soon. And here we have a speed board for 110 kilometers per hour. Because we are increasing our speed, we didn't have a warning that this was coming up. And we cannot increase our speed until we have our entire train has completely passed that sign. Okay, this black and white post off to our right is it's an indicator of where the level crossing will be activated. So down the track in front of us, around the corner to the right, there's a level crossing. It's actually a fair distance away. But because trains can be zooming through here fairly quickly, they need to activate it and get the crossing down. So this sign tells us where that activation happens. And I think it's here. It's not at every level crossing, but I think it's here because we're so close to a yard. You wouldn't want to park your freight train there while you're unloading it and not realize that your level crossing a mile down the track has been activated. Here is our first block signal after leaving the station. This is a good time to talk about how German railway signals are set up from a big picture perspective. We just left a station where there are potentially many places to drive our train, including platforms and sidings. There are running and shunting movements going on, so the signaling can be more complex. Now we have left the station and are on the main line. Generally speaking, there's nothing happening between our last station and our next station. But as with most rules, there are always exceptions, and that is true here as well. But let's keep it simple for now. Until we get to the next station, we just need to make sure that we don't hit any trains in front of us. The signals assist with that by dividing the track into blocks. Only one train can occupy a block at a time, and block signals help to prevent that from happening. As we approach the next station, we will be greeted with an entrance signal. While the mainline block signals are automatic, the station signals are controlled by a signaler who needs to set routes through the stations. Stopping at stations will also often require you to leave the main line to visit a platform, and so there will be necessary speed reductions. It's important to know that station speed restrictions are handled differently depending on whether you are stopping or just passing through. In our first example, we'll discuss stopping at a station. The entry signal will often impose a speed restriction that applies until you stop at the platform. You will then receive a new speed restriction from the exit signal. If you stopped at the platform, the exit signal speed is valid immediately. You don't have to wait until you pass the signal to accelerate. You can then proceed to line speed listed in your timetable once your entire train has passed the points of the junction leading onto the main line. However, the rules are different if you're just passing through. You will need to honor the speed restriction that you received at the entrance signal until your entire train has passed the exit signal. At that point, you can accelerate to the exit signal speed. And once your entire train has passed the junction points on the main line, you can resume your timetable speed. Okay, that about covers it for this route. There are two more um, signs and signals that I do want to go over that are on the original route that I had chosen. So I'm going to show you some footage from that route, and we'll talk about those two signs and signals specifically. Okay, so we've paused here at a distance signal. You can see that we have a proceed aspect, but we have this inverted triangle with a 6 in it, an orange 6. And that is giving us a speed restriction that will be applicable at the next signal, which in this case is about a kilometer away. Okay, we've now reached the main signal, and we can see that there is a triangle with a white 6 on the top of the signal. That is indicating that as of this signal, the speed will be 60 kilometers per hour. And we have another speed advisory at the bottom. So at the next signal, we need to expect a speed limit of 60 kilometers per hour. Okay, here's our final sign of the episode. This white and black striped board on the right is called a halt board. It's warning of an impending station coming up, and you're not going to see it at every station. They're generally at ones that are maybe around corners or for some other reason difficult to see. So once you see this board, you're about 1 kilometer out from the station. And that is it for this tutorial. That should cover the vast majority of the signs and signals you need to get around the rails. I will link some great resources in addition to the Zusi manual in the description of the video. I highly recommend you bookmark those. And if you're driving along and you see a sign or a signal that you don't recognize, just hit pause, Look it up, figure out what it means, and see if it applies to you. And before long, you will be reading these like a pro.